Hi, Kathy. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you? Oh, it's a good thing I turned my camera on. I should have just.
Sorry, I was grabbing my lunch.
That's okay.
Is your day just crazy? Like hour by hour, you are literally just shifting gears.
This week has been that way for sure. And it's funny because I have days where it's like, oh, today won't be so bad. Like I've got a block of free time where I can get some work done. And then somehow calls get scheduled, like.
Somehow BHT comes calling.
Yeah, it's all right. So I have a lot of slides.
Okay.
But we should still have a good 20, at least 15 minutes for Q&A.
Sounds. It's kind of a funny mix. I mean, the folks who are signing up, it really is SDOH, behavioral health, and then primary care keeps sneaking in there, which is wonderful.
Yeah, that's great. This is actually a really good one for them. Next week, when we do the QA, I think it might be too remedial for folks in primary care, but maybe not.
Okay. Well, we won't tell them that. Actually, we have, it looks like Planned Parenthood has been with us through this series, and that might be,
Cool.
Might be a good one for them, especially as they have brought on behavioral health within there. So.
All right, I might go refill my coffee cup.
Wonderful. I'm gonna eat here, so.
Okay.
Hi, Cynthia.
Hello.
I think I got us all set up, and I'll try to remember to do the polling at the end.
Yes, I do see you logged in. I was just about to log into that account. Are you good with it though?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll stay in as myself.
Okay. Good afternoon, folks. I can see we're starting to get some folks joining on, and I didn't want you having to see me eat my sandwich, so but we will start in just about 4 or 5 minutes here. So please grab your lunch or finish it up and get some coffee, and we'll get going. Kathy, are you back from refilling your coffee?
I am.
Just making sure you didn't run for the hills.
No,
But we have Ricky as backup, so I feel confident that
my co-presenter.
and you should be able to share your screen, correct?
Yes. Yeah, I'll put up the. Oh, no, at least I can't. Sharice, it's saying that attendee screen sharing is disabled.
All right, Sumitra, how do I fix that?
So click on Kathy's name and make her a co-host. If you can.
All righty, Kathy, can you try now? Oh, yay. Thanks, Sumitra. Still got folks jumping on, Kathy, so maybe another minute if you're okay.
Yep, no problem.
For folks jumping on, we're just going to wait another minute or so, let people transition from one Zoom to the next, and then we'll get started here fairly quickly. Kathy, I think we've got our crew, it looks like. So should we go ahead and if you're ready, should we go ahead? Okay. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is part 2 of our change management series. We're thrilled to have Cathy Kaufmann from Kaufmann Associates with us. She does a lot of work, her and her team with us through the Medicaid transformation. It's just has great experience that is always valuable to share. So happy to have Cathy with us. So today we're going to be focused on strategies working across organizations and across sectors. So as I look down our participant list, we have, it looks like behavioral health and social determinants of health and primary care with us today too. So that'll be a great discussion. Got lots of slides today, but have time set aside for Q&A in the very end. And happy to have you with us next Thursday as part 3, or the final part of our series, where we'll be looking at QI and QA in coordination and conjunction with change management. So that will be next Thursday from 12 to 1 as we continue our lunch and learn. So thank you so much for joining us. And with that, just ask that you remain on mute unless you have a question. And again, feel free to always use your chat box as well. So with that, now we'll go to Cathy. Thank you.
Thanks, Cherise. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining on your lunch hour. So today's webinar in this series on change management is going to focus on creating change through cross-sector collaborations. I'm going to go through a bunch of different models. First, a little bit about me for those of you I've not met or who weren't on previous webinars. I'm a health and social policy consultant, been working in health and social systems for quite a while, lots of experience with cross-sector initiatives. I both love and hate cross-sector initiatives. It's one or the other, nothing in between. When they work, they're phenomenal. So excited to be talking to you about that topic today. So as a reminder, for those of you who did not, or for those of you who did not join last week's webinar, change management is a school of thinking developed because change is really hard. In fact, it's so hard that 3/4 of all change efforts end up failing. So change management is a systematic approach to helping people and organizations successfully implement change. It's really important to remember that change management is not project management. Project management is about the technical side of moving from the current to the future state, and change management is about the people side. It's about winning over hearts and minds. It's not about what IT system do you buy and what's your timeline and project plan for implementing it. It's about convincing people that this new IT system is actually going to be a value add and making sure that they have the knowledge and skills to be able to use it effectively. So, and cross-sector collaborations are really the only way to truly manage change at a community level, not just at an organizational level. So today I'm going to talk about what cross-sector collaboration is. Let's define it, have a shared definition, and why it matters. We're going to look at 4 models of cross-sector collaboration: the needle-moving collaboratives, comprehensive community initiatives, which have been studied much by the Aspen Institute, the turning outward model, and the collective impact model. And for those of you who were on last week's session, just as when we looked at a bunch of models for change management, there was a lot of overlap between them. You're going to see the same thing. Everybody kind of coalescing around the same ideas, a little bit of nuance difference between the different models, but mostly just using different words, but talking about the same things. Lastly, I'll share some resources and tools, point you in the direction of some sites that have a bunch of helpful tools to support cross-sector collaboration. And then we should have a good 15, maybe 20 minutes for Q&A if anybody's got any questions or folks want to have some discussion and share and problem solve their experiences in cross-sector collaborations. So first, what do we mean when we say a cross-sector collaboration? So the common definition is that they're alliances of individuals and organizations who can come from nonprofit, government, philanthropic and business sectors that use their diverse perspectives and resources to jointly solve a societal problem and achieve a shared goal. So people coming around the table to work together, and their differences are actually a value add, not a problem. Cross-sector collaboration is really critically important for the work all of us on this webinar today want to accomplish. There's an increasing awareness that complex problems can't be solved with siloed solutions. Very easy example is the increasing awareness of the intersection between social determinants of health and healthcare delivery and health outcomes. No one sector can solve that disconnect on their own. Cross-sector collaborations help organizations abandon their individual agendas and take more of a community lens and collective approach to their work. It doesn't mean you don't still have an individual agenda. It just creates some space for our eyes to lift higher up on the horizon. This approach is more effective than solutions that are embodied within a single organization. Single organizations tend to only work on one part of a problem and perhaps only for certain subpopulations, not the whole community. Okay, so I'm going to get into going through our models. I'm going to do my best not to talk too fast, but yell at me if I do, and I will slow down. And you are welcome to ask questions along the way if they arise, or just save them to the end for discussion. So let me start with the needle-moving collaboratives. President Obama created a White House Council for Community Solutions to demonstrate the power of communities engaging and working together. So the first task the council undertook was, instead of looking at individual programs, they wanted to look at communities that were successfully solving problems together and moving the needle, actually making measurable change on some kind of a social issue that improved results for the whole community. So they worked with a consulting firm, the Bridgespan Group, to identify which collaboratives were effective. They used a measure of those who've achieved at least 10% progress on a community-wide metric. Some folks on this webinar may think 10% doesn't sound like very much, but 10% over time repeatedly is phenomenal. And few organizations are able to achieve that kind of an outcome. So they wanted to look at who's been successful and what were their ingredients for success. So through that research, they identified 5 core elements for success. I'm going to talk about all 5 of them. A shared vision and agenda, effective leadership and governance, alignment of resources, having dedicated staff capacity and what they call appropriate structure, and we'll get into that, and having sufficient funding. So first, let me talk about developing a shared vision and agenda. Having a common vision and agenda is time-consuming, can be challenging, especially with a diverse group of stakeholders, but it is the most important step for a collaborative. Establishing quantifiable goals can catalyze support and help build momentum. Having a clear roadmap helps organizations look beyond their own individual interests and focus on some broader goals. Most of the successful collaboratives underwent a pretty extensive research and data collection process to better understand the problem and figure out how systems need to shift over time. And also important is that community members have to really actively share in the process for success, or collaboratives are going to miss opportunities because they're only looking at data and research and not also listening to communities. So the second ingredient for success here is effective leadership and governance. This is one I think is incredibly important in whether or not a collaborative will ultimately prove successful or not. Collaboratives need to have a strong leader who will fully engage stakeholders and coordinate their efforts. This model talks about it as one strong leader. That's probably not the only way for this to work. There are many collaboratives where you've got some co-chairs of the collaborative or you have multiple leaders. The important point is that leadership really, really matters. It's the most important thing when it comes to change within an organization. It is no less important when you're talking about change across a community. The only difference is you have the opportunity to have more than one leader. The biggest challenge is not so much in bringing folks to the table, but keeping them there, especially for years and especially when the work is hard. So leaders play a really critical role in that. It's important that they be respected by the community and that they be viewed as a neutral and honest broker. Otherwise, trust breaks down if it feels like this is supposed to be a collaborative, but really it feels like the leader's individual organization agenda. Leaders got to work to create and maintain a diverse and inclusive table where both larger organizations and smaller grassroots organizations have power and a voice. A very highly structured governance is not required, but decision-making rules have got to be very clear. That's probably in this model the one component of governance that matters most. How are decisions going to be made? What will the collaborative do when there isn't consensus? So third is alignment of resources. So successful collaboratives work together to build linkages and support measures to assess progress. Sometimes they're pushing for new services, but a lot of the time collaborative work is about identifying gaps, figuring out how silos unnecessarily drain resources and how collaboration could leverage existing resources better and allow for more effective use of the dollars that folks already have in a community. So in many cases, this means working together to target efforts towards a particular population, schools, neighborhoods, something very focused and targeted and not a bunch of ad hoc efforts. Effective collaborations make extensive use of data at every stage of their work. They're using data to define the problem, to set and collect output measures, and to make sure that the group comes to consensus about an agreed upon set of outcome measures that are going to be used to define whether or not the collaborative has been successful. Fourth component in this model is dedicated staff and appropriate structure. So dedicated staff, I think this is one that probably will resonate with a lot of folks. We've all been invited to collaboratives or, you know, some kind of loose collective where there's no staffing. And even though attendees might be really willing and eager to work with each other, if there is no staff to do the work in between meetings to ensure that the meetings are used effectively, things tend to fall apart despite interest, commitment, passion. Staff create agendas, facilitate meetings, push the work ahead between meetings, keep members informed, and help keep relationships working productively. There is no one recipe in this model for what staff should look like. Could just be one loned person, could be multiple people. So that's really, you know, the staffing should fit the collaborative. It's just important that these functions be fulfilled. So dedicated resources around convening, facilitation, data collection, communications, and then just the administrative support. And then lastly, very much connected to the need for staffing and structure is sufficient funding for the work. So collaboratives, it's really hard for collaboratives to be successful without any funding to support the work of the collaborative. And this is the sufficient funding is really about investment in the collaborative itself. The collaborative might be working together to identify additional funds for the work it wants to see happen in a community, but the collaborative itself needs to have some funding in order to be able to do this work. And that funding is really about making sure that there's staff and structure. So investments can be in-kind contributions of staff. That's pretty common. Foundations will sometimes fund staffing for collaboratives. And then identifying sustainable funding for the collaborative becomes one of the objectives. In this model, the collaborative is expected to sustain itself and continue to exist over time and not just be sort of a one and done entity. Okay, move on to model number 2. Comprehensive community initiatives. This is a model developed in the late 80s, 90s, around a broad set of initiatives that were launched that really focused on community as the heart of solutions. These initiatives were really focused on anti-poverty policy in poor urban neighborhoods. Many CCIs elect to work through a new collaboration of some form rather than an organization that existed in the community for a long time without any one of the participating agencies taking the lead. It's a very collective approach. CCIs are also usually made up of both residents, people in the community, as well as people who are not residents, but who are bringing some outside resources. They have power, decision-making power, or some kind of expertise that will be helpful to the CCI. The focus of the CCI is a little bit different than in some other collaboratives because a key goal is around developing capacity, typically in a neighborhood, developing capacity of residents and institutions to both define and come up with solutions and implement solutions in the neighborhood. Degree of formality is all over the place. These can be real ad hoc kind of meetings or really formal nonprofit organizations can be developed out of them. And creating the new collaboration rather than having an existing organization lead a collaboration has been seen as necessary, especially in really underserved, under-resourced neighborhoods, because it's just felt that they're not going to have the capacity to be able to do this work. Additional resources are needed. So CCIs, the Aspen Institute has done a lot of work examining how how CCIs have managed to be successful and identified some key features of them. And you'll see a lot of parallels with the needle moving model. CCIs are comprehensive. They're not siloed and looking only at one system. They're holistic. They're multi-sectoral. They're also meant to be long-term, not a one and done. They are developmental. They grow and go through stages. And they are concerned with both the process and the outcome. And this is because they are going into neighborhoods that have really been under-resourced. And a key goal is not just the outcome the CCI is trying to get to, but building up capacity and putting the neighborhood and the people who live in a neighborhood at the center instead of leaving them out in the audience. Okay, model number 3 is the turning outward model. So this is a process that the Harvard Institute for Public Innovation developed. It's been in place for 20, 30 years. And it entails taking steps to better understand communities, change processes and thinking to make conversations more community focused, being proactive to community issues, and putting community aspirations first. So another model that really is trying to shift the focus on what does the community see, think, feel, and want, not what do outside experts think the community needs. In this model, the idea is that too many organizations and their leaders are too inward focused. They're really thinking, maybe not intentionally, but just about their own organizations. And it inadvertently is at the expense of the communities they're trying to serve. So this model is really about creating a mindset and a lens where you're using, I like this quote, we're using the community as your reference point for creating change and not your conference room. Turning outward model is also rooted in 5 key principles, or they call 5 big ideas. 1, community ownership. 2, strategies have to fit the community. 3, a sustainable enabling environment has to be created. There should be a focus on impact and belief. And the story a community tells itself is also really important to whether or not a change initiative, cross-sector change initiative will succeed. So community ownership means taking effective action in communities depends on genuine ownership of the action by the larger community. Data is an important piece of this, but it is not enough. Public knowledge is seen as equally valuable and maybe more valuable than data. And this only comes from authentically engaging the community in conversations leading up to identifying what initiatives the collaborative wants to address. Also important in the model is the strategies have to fit the community. Institute sees communities as being in one of 5 developmental stages. Every community goes through, or you hope will go through, all 5 stages. They call these their community rhythms. It's really important for a community to do work to know what stage it's in. Most communities are in one of the first 3 stages: waiting place, impasse, or catalytic. Waiting places, you haven't even identified what change you want to make. Folks feel powerless. You're maybe waiting for some new mayor or somebody to be elected or some new organization to form before you even feel like change will be possible. Impasse is community members are at loggerheads, or organizations are at loggerheads. There's no consensus. And catalytic is when the community starts to shift and you start to identify potential change and agreement around that change. These stages, they believe, explain why some communities are able to move faster and others slower when it comes to change. And each one of these stages, they identify do's and don'ts for strategies that will work given the developmental stage the community is in at any given time. And some strategies are going to work in one community, but not the other. What it takes to accelerate and deepen change varies, and it's highly connected to the developmental stage a community is in. third is that having a sustainable enabling environment. Collaboratives have to create a sense of possibility. This is what the enabling environment is. It's an environment that enables change to happen. These are the underlying conditions for the community to change how it works together. And without this, well-intentioned efforts will not work. There has to be a sense of change is possible. Might be hard, might be a long time in coming, but it has to be felt as possible. Fourth is a focus on both impact and belief. Impact is usually something most collaboratives try to have. You want to know that your efforts together have some result. You've had impact on the community in a way you can measure. But this model says, yes, impact is important, but equally important and often overlooked is belief. Belief is the intangible factor that prompts and prods people to step forward and engage, makes them willing to join with others and to let go of their self-interest in favor of common interests. And how the work is done is important as what the work is. So it's another principle about really focusing on the people side of change, not just the mechanics and the plans. And then lastly, the story a community tells itself is a critical factor in the success of cross-sector collaboratives under this model. The stories people tell about their community shapes their mindsets, their attitudes, their behaviors, their actions. These stories really impact people's sense of possibility and hope. They're the greatest hidden factor to whether or not a community moves forward. The narrative a community has about itself has a direct impact on whether or not a collaborative will be successful. So because of that, their model urges collaboratives to create an authentic can-do narrative to kind of counteract any negative narratives that have been running in a community and give folks a sense of hope that the community's on a new trajectory. Okay, and then lastly, and I'm going to guess that this is a model many folks on this webinar have heard about before. Collective impact has really become the model for cross-sector collaboration. It's a concept that was first developed by John Kenya at a consulting firm and published in the Stanford Social Innovation Review back in 2011. So collective impact is a cross-sector partnership framework that brings people together in a structured way to achieve social change. It also outlines 5 conditions needed for collective impact to be successful. Again, some overlap with the models we've seen previously. 1, you have to start with a common agenda. 2, establish shared measurement. 3, foster mutually reinforcing activities. 4, encourage continuous communication. And 5, have a strong backbone. So here's a little more about these 5 conditions. The common agenda is about having a common understanding of the problem and then a shared vision for change. You then need shared measurement so that you can collect data and measure results. Focus on performance management, and then also really importantly, develop a shared sense of accountability. Everybody is accountable for the measures that the collaborative has identified. There need to be mutually reinforcing activities. Different partners around the table are going to have different approaches. There is strength in the difference, not weakness. The importance is that there be coordination through a joint plan of action. 4th, continuous communication. Just like change management models focused on individual organizations, communication is critical. Biggest danger is in not communicating enough, not under-communicating, or not over-communicating. So there needs to be consistent and open communication, and communication really is the best tool for building trust, and trust really underlies the collaborative and whether or not it will succeed. And one of the tools I'll point you to in a few minutes here will be on that topic in particular. And then lastly, in the collective impact model, in the way that other models talk about the need for staffing, collective impact identifies what they call backbone support, or even a backbone organization. It's a separate organization with staff. They've got resources and skills to convene and coordinate participating organizations. You all have benefited from what I see as a phenomenal backbone organization there in the BHT region through BHT. This is a key value that BHT brings to partners in the community. So there are some principles around the practice of the collective impact model. Initiatives need to be designed and implemented with a priority placed on equity. Community members have to be included in the collaborative. This is something done with community members, not to community members. It's critical to recruit and then co-create with cross-sector partners. Cross-sector partners are a partner at the table. They are there to help define the collective impact collaborative, not just be attendees at a meeting. It's important to use data to continuously learn, adapt, and improve. You need to cultivate leaders with unique system leadership skills. So it's hard enough to be an effective leader for change within an organization. It's infinitely more complicated to try and be an effective leader for change across many organizations. So really cultivating leaders who have that skill set and helping them grow and develop is another really important component of the model. Collective impact model collaborations focus on program and system strategies. They build a culture that fosters relationships, trust, and respect across participants. Really hard for folks to work together, especially if there's fear of individual organizations losing turf, losing funds, if there isn't a really strong foundation of trust and respect. And then lastly, it shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all. The model really has to be customized for the local context. So collective impact efforts tend to occur over 4 developmental phases. So in phase 1, you're generating ideas, having dialogue, convening stakeholders, having community conversations about issues, figuring out the context, identifying available resources, doing community outreach that's specific to the goal you want to achieve, and determining whether or not there's a there. Is there enough consensus and urgency to move forward and formally develop a collective impact collaboration? In phase 2, the collaborative starts to initiate action. You're identifying champions and forming the cross-sector group. You're mapping the landscape. You're using data to make the case for the change you'd like to make. More community outreach. And then identifying your baseline data for key issues and figuring out where the gaps are. In 3, the collaborative is solidifying and moving forward, creating the infrastructure, the backbone organization, and processes around how the group will work together, landing on what your common agenda is, your common goals, your strategy, continuing to engage the community, and now shifting into building public will for the change that you've identified is needed. And again, establishing some shared metrics to be able to measure your progress. Lastly, phase 4 is about sustaining your action and your impact. You can refine your governance and your infrastructure as needed. Instead of developing plans, you're now supporting implementation, making sure that implementation is aligned to the goals and strategies you developed in earlier phases. Continue engagement, and at this phase, advocacy for the change you need likely will be needed. And then lastly, you are continuing to collect, track, and report on progress. There's a culture of continuous improvement and learning as you go. So there are 5 key questions that any community or organization should ask before deciding to use the collective impact model. One is, do we aim to affect a needle change on a community-wide metric? Two is, do we believe a long-term, that's like 3 to 5 years or more, investment is needed by diverse stakeholders to achieve success? So collective impact is not about minor short-term change. It's about bigger, thornier issues that require those cross-sector brains all around the table and concerted effort over multiple years, as well as investment. Third, does everyone believe cross-sector engagement is essential for the change? If folks don't, then their incentive for showing up and actively participate will be undermined. Fourth, is the group committed to using measurable data to set the agenda and improve over time? If folks want to talk about change and identify some solutions they could do together, that's all fine and well, but it's not a collective impact model if there aren't measurable data that show improvement over time. And fifth, are you committed to having community members as leaders, partners, and producers of the impact? The community has to be brought in. Another model reiterating the fact that change cannot happen to a community, it has to happen with a community. So those are, that's a really quick overview, I know, of the models out there around cross-sector collaboration. It's, you know, their research into the effectiveness of cross-sector collaborations is really only started in the last 10 to 20 years and really picking up in the last 10 years as the recognition of the need for more cross-sector solutions has emerged. So let me pause for a second and see if folks have any questions about the particular models. I don't know if we have anything in the chat.
Looks like you're good, Kathy. So
okay. Okay. So let me share some tools. So let me say, before I share some tools, it doesn't matter what model you use. You can see there's a lot of overlap between them. I really like the collective impact model. I think it's saying all the same things that the other models we looked at said, but for the collective impact model, there are a tremendous amount of resources, and that makes the job of trying to develop a cross-sector collaborative that much easier. And I like the language and terminology that the collective impact model uses. But again, it really, you know, what's important is not what terms what model you say you are or what terms you use. What's important is that the key ingredients are there. Leadership, trust, bringing the community in, using data, and really trying to break down silos. So a few resources and tools. I mentioned last week, I'm going to show this again for new folks. The Public Health Foundation developed a matrix for potential cross-sector collaborative members to use to prepare for change. It's a very simple structure for members to talk about what they have in common, their differences, any barriers holding them back from collaborating, and then what it would take to collaborate. And the idea is that after going through this process, the collaborative is then really ready to figure out where does it want to focus. So here's the matrix, very, very simple. Get a group of people together. You talk about everything you have in common. For example, are there certain services that some of you all provide? Are you all working with the same population? Are you all running into the same sort of barriers around a particular resource or process? And then you talk about your differences. You might have different funding streams. Those funding streams might be really restrictive and get in the way of some of the collaboration that you want to do, for example. Your barriers, what's getting in the way of being able to work together. And then fourth, you identify your collaboration areas. Where do you, after you look at what you have in common, what's different, what's getting in everybody's way, then you want to be in a place where you can start to identify, here are the places where we could really work together and make things better for the community. As I mentioned, the collective impact model is incredibly popular, and there are a tremendous amount of resources that have been developed for it over the last 10 years or so. FSG has a website that's the Collective Impact Forum. There are tools, webinars, trainings, all you can read stories, success stories, forums for asking questions, a whole array of resources available, all of which I think are really well done. So for example, there's a starter guide for backbone organizations and tools for standing up a steering committee. Every collective impact collaborative is supposed to also have a steering committee to help drive the collaborative. Toolkits for working in groups for evaluation. In addition to the Collective Impact Forum, there's also the Tamarack Institute based in Canada. They have a bunch of tools on collective impact, and I think they're really well done. They're short, they're simple, they're practical. I find them very helpful. One in particular that I want to point you to, oh, just so you know, because it can be a little bit tricky to find their stuff. If you go to the Tamarack Institute, you go to the Learning Center. And under the Learning Center, it will show collective impact as one of the topic areas, and that's where you'll find a whole list of tools. A tool around building community readiness, assessing individual organizational readiness, building resilient and sustainable initiatives, community engagement, tools for backbone organizations, and evaluation. And then I wanted to highlight this brief. They call it a tool, but it's called Turf, Trust, Co-Creation, and Collective Impact. And I think it's a great read. I love this line: authentic community change moves at the speed of trust. That really resonates for me. I think we have all participated in cross-sector collaborations before, and if there isn't trust, you can't move forward. If there is trust, it's amazing what leaders of organizations who you never would have expected would step up and be visionary and selfless. It happens, and it really only can happen if time and energy is built into building trust and helping people feel safe enough that they don't have to just think about protecting their turf. That's really critical. It's hard. It's more art than science, but I think that this is a really helpful tool to give you the right mindset for thinking about how to tackle that issue over time. That's the overview. Quick 101 on cross-sector collaboration. I would be happy to answer any questions or hear about your individual experiences with participating in cross-sector collaboration and what's worked or not for you.
Cathy, while folks get their thoughts together real quick, it sure seems like there's a lot of, and this just might be my perception, so would love your feedback, but there appears to be some wonderful funding opportunities for collective impact models. Is that an increase that you're seeing, or is that just me?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's not necessarily like new in the last year or two, but I think over the last 5 to 10 years, the collective impact model became instantly very popular, in part because there wasn't a lot of non-academic writing about how to work collaboratively across sectors. And suddenly here's this model. It's not that the ideas in it were so radically innovative and never been talked about anywhere else before, but it really made what we know about cross-sector collaboratives succeeding or failing, made that information, put it together in a really practical and useful way. And really calling out the need for staffing by making clear there's got to be a backbone organization. So when that model first appeared, I think it took 4 or 5 years, but foundations started catching on, and a number of them pushed the programs they were funding or put out funding to support collective impact approaches. There is at this point a fair amount of evidence base around the collective impact model and its ability to really help communities come together and make change. So this is not theoretical, right? This is practical, useful, and been around long enough and evaluated so that now we can see there's a real case for why this can really make a difference.
Thanks, Kathy. Do folks have any questions or feedback? I believe, looking at the list, you're all part of at least the Spokane Collaborative, and it looked like we had Darren, but maybe he jumped off from the Lincoln County Collaborative. But any questions from folks?
So we can make sure that, well, Charisse, I know BHT will send slides out to everybody who participated, so you'll see what's in the slides. And then we can also compile a list of helpful resources for folks. And I really encourage you to take a look at them.
Oh, absolutely. And Smitri is going to be sending out the survey here coming up, which is wonderful, or I can do that too if you're not able to, Smitri. But we are recording these, and so the part 1 and part 2, and next week part 3 will be up on our website for folks too. So I know that as organizations work cross-sector, and then not only that, but also work internally on change management, if you're working with your team, please feel free to use our resources. That's why we do this. It's why we offer these opportunities. Kathy's wonderful. If, for instance, part 1, we had some questions from a particular organization, and Cathy was terrific in answering those for them. So
I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions. If you just email Charisse or Symmetria, they'll forward it to me, and I'm happy to, you know, if you're stuck with something or have a particular question, I'm happy to share my 2 cents for what it's worth.
Well, it's worth a lot more than 2 cents, I have to say.
3 cents.
And we have seen with the Spokane Collaborative opportunities, not only with the Robert Wood Johnson, but we were also applying for yet another funding opportunity, you know, being able to highlight the collective impact, but also being able to highlight in our region 50-something organizations coming together around some particular equity goals is no small feat. I take no credit. It's all others doing the hard work, but it's the organizations doing the hard work, and so love that. So any last questions before I launch our kind of final evaluation here? Okay, and just want a quick reminder, next Thursday is unfortunately our last time with Cathy, but it will be part 3 of our series and really highlight the QI and QA, which are really important in how they intersect with change management. So I
know all of you want to spend next week's lunch hour talking about quality improvement and quality assurance, because who doesn't?
That's exactly, yes, it helps things digest so well. You might want to have lunch before or after, I don't know. Take the afternoon off, I don't know. All right. Thanks so much, Cathy. And with that, I'm gonna launch our survey here. And if folks don't mind just taking a few minutes to give us feedback, we really do appreciate it. And we do flex based on your feedback, so.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Yay, Charisse, you're a Zoom pro.
Thank you, Smitra. And after I asked you how to share the screen, I was like, oh, duh, I knew how to do that. But thank you. I have to admit, I got a little bit of panic there just for a second. So I appreciate it.
No problem. That's why I'm here.
Thanks, dear. Have a good afternoon.
Yeah, thanks. Bye, you guys.